And so access to the information is not the issue anymore. It's culture. It's culture, because culture is going to shape what information matters and what I'm going to use the power of this phone to do. So so what I want us to do is start there, right? And I'm going to tell you a story of when I went to China. I went to China with my wife in 2019, and I was observing things, and I'm always thinking, how can we get ahead? I'm not into. I'm not liberal. I'm not conservative. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I just people ask me who you going to vote for in the next election. I say I'm voting for black people in every election. That's what I'm just voting for black people, whatever that means, right? So I'm always looking for ways that we can win, right? Um, I'm not really into things like equality. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I'm not making fun of you if you talk about equality, because we grew up with hearing about equality, 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 and that's fine. I think it's a good thing, but I just don't live in that world. Like when I used to run track, I was never running the race to try to be equal to the guy next to me. I wanted to win. I wanted to win the gold medal. Uh, I also think that it is inherently white supremacist to somehow think that the mecca for black people is to be equal to white people. It doesn't mean white people. If you white, don't get scared. I don't know if it's white people. She looked like I don't know how much melanin you got, but I don't. I want to make it clear. If you're not black, this is not anti-white. This is pro-black. There's a difference. I need you to understand that, right? And so I will say that I think that we're selling ourselves short by saying once we're equal, then we've achieved the biggest goal. We've reached the pinnacle. We've become the best we can be. No, maybe you're supposed to be the best. Maybe you're supposed to be number one. Maybe instead of you following the world, maybe the world should be following you. And this is nothing new. This is what they did in ancient Kemet and everything else. We were training other people on certain things, astronomy and mathematics, all that stuff, medicine, all that. Okay, so let's get back to that. Let's talk about that. So let me start with the first of the Ten Commandments. So by the way, I want to ask, what should I look at in terms of time? Because I want to make sure I don't go over my time. Noon. Okay, perfect. All right, so we got some time here. All right, so the first commandment is this, and this is 10 definitive rules of wealth that will shape the culture in a way that will allow you to get ahead. And I know I mentioned our trip to China, and that was another thing that inspired the book. I should share this so you understand where this is coming from. When I was in China, I was really fascinated by the fact that we went to different regions of China. And in every region of China, I saw nothing but entrepreneurs selling us stuff. If you've ever been in that space, anybody ever been in that space where you're around like Chinese entrepreneurs? They are the best salespeople. They are extremely assertive. They'll upsell you, downsell you, negotiate with you. They follow your eyes to see if you're even looking at a product. Like I was walking through a store with some real expensive stuff, and I couldn't. I tried not to. I had to quickly peek at stuff because they would see me. They were watching my eyes, like in football. Anybody's ever played football? They teach you to watch the quarterback's eyes to see where the ball's going. They would watch my eyes, so I couldn't even look at stuff because they would be on me like vultures. So part of me was like, man, I was pissed off. Like, man, leave me alone. But the other part of me was like, okay, I respect this. This is great. Wow. And here's what's interesting. I saw thousands of entrepreneurs making tons of money selling all these products. And I bet you less than 10% of them actually went to business school. But all of them were running a business. So what were we seeing? We didn't see the result of education. This was culture. They were just raising the family with this is what we do. Right? So cultural consciousness is the key to wealth. That's the key I don't think a lot of us really talk about. So let me give you the first commandment. The first commandment is always be an asset to your family. And these are things that you can talk to your children, grandchildren about. This is really important. Let me tell you where this came from. Part of this came from personal experience. I growing up, I saw a relative of mine who was the baby of the family. He didn't have a father. He was raised by his mother and his two older sisters and his older brother. And as the baby of the family, as you know, sometimes that can come with some deficiencies. All right, the baby can gain some resilience because they got to fight for stuff and be scrappy. But at the same time, if he's got these older sisters kind of nurturing him and covering for him, you know what that can kind of turn into. Unfortunately, sometimes you got big 28-year-old babies out here with beards and stuff, and they know how to make babies, which is even scarier, right? And so this person in my family. He got to the point where he just kind of got used to people covering for him. He got used to, if he showed up at your house, it wasn't because he was offering something. It was because he was, he's one of those like, let me hold $5 type people, right? Showing up to the family barbecue, eat up all the food, but didn't bring any food. That kind of person, right? And a lot of it was driven by mindset. I knew him very well. And he kind of felt that the world just owed him something. He talked about things he didn't have as a kid and things he went through. And it led to this deficiency mentally where he just kind of always felt sorry for himself. And so he'd get locked up and go to jail, and he's wait for his mama to bail him out. He doesn't go and get an apartment and do things grown-ups do. He's living with his mama, and he's 28, 29, 30 years old. And then he's in his 30s and in his 40s. Now, at this point, his mother's starting to get older. And his mother's in her 70s. And instead of showing up to his mother's house and saying, hey, mama, what can I do? You need help? Let me cut the grass. He's showing up still, can I hold $20, mama? That kind of thing, the drugs and all that other stuff, right? And it made me think about this idea of seeing yourself as an asset to other people as opposed to being a liability. And really almost to the point where I think it's almost okay to challenge, not shame. I don't want to say shame because that's a toxic word, but almost sort of say, hey, you can help too. Why are you showing up always asking for something? What are you bringing to the table? And the thing is that this is more of an attitude, right? If I come into a room and I'm looking at every person as an opportunity for me to get something from you, then I'm taking from the group, I'm taking from the collective. I become a drain on other people, just like this young man became a drain on his mother as opposed to an asset to his mother, right? But let's flip that. So imagine if I show up and let's say I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of anything, a lot of skill, nothing, but I just say, hey, what can I do? How can I help? Can I do something? And let's say still, I might still need something from the group. But before I tell you what you can do for me, I start off by saying, here's what I can do for you. I become a much more pleasant person to interact with. Right? It's like the customer that comes into the store who says, I don't have a lot of money, but I will pay, or I will work off what I can. Or what can I do? If you give me some food, I will do X, Y, Z for you. Right? That becomes more of a beneficial transaction. Like that's how business is done, as opposed to constant charity. Because the thing about charity that's interesting is that it's not all that it's cracked up to be. Charity is important. Everybody should do it. But unfortunately, when you form this consistent relationship with another person where they're always receiving charity and you're always the benefactor, then what it does is it can cripple them mentally to the point where they don't feel that they can do anything for themselves, and it drains the hell out of you. I don't know, has anybody ever been like the person in your family where you're the one who makes the most money, or you're the successful one in the family, and know how draining that is? Whenever the family has a problem, maybe they call you and they need to borrow money from you, or you go out to dinner and don't nobody else even look at the bill. They like, oh, she's gonna pay for it, And it's tough. It's tough because maybe you went to an Ivy League school, or maybe you became a lawyer, or you're the one who saves money, and that's really draining. In fact, that's why I always tell people, I don't really think any smart person with money should be bragging about how much money they have. A lot of people get caught in these traps. I saw a TED talk from a lady who got an MBA from Harvard, and she said that she was on welfare. And she said, but I have an MBA from Harvard. And she talked about going out to dinner with her friends and maintaining this facade of being this, wealthy Harvard graduate. And she would have negative $18 in her bank account and be sweating, hoping somebody else is going to pay the tab in that expensive restaurant they were eating at. Right. So I just say, lie about it. Don't lie per se, but don't tell everybody what you got going on. Anybody I see on the internet that's flexing and bragging about how much money they have, I say, okay, you haven't had money that long. And you're maybe young, you haven't learned, you're trying to fulfill your ego, because I don't tell nobody nothing. Like people will figure it out. Like eventually you're like, okay, you're an expert on finance, you probably got some money, but I'm like, oh yeah, but I get my clothes at Walmart. Yeah, it's okay. Like I no, no, I'm all right. Like I don't want to draw that attention because people, what people eventually learn is that when you have lots of money and you're telling everybody, you then become a target. You become a target of people that want to rob you, want to scam you, people that want to offer you any crazy harebrained business idea. I talked to a young lady I mentor who comes from a family that didn't have a lot of money, and she won a lawsuit and came into a couple $100,000. And I mean, her relatives were all over her. Like, oh, why? Well, I thought you loved me, and you can't give me, or they would have present business ideas like, well, all you got to do is put up 20,000, and we can do this business, and I said, don't do any of that, because you're not going to end up protecting that money. That money is going to disappear, right? So ultimately, showing up as an asset, I think this is something that culturally can be managed. I think this is a principle. This is something that you can say to the kids and grandkids. Look, when you're part of this group, part of this collective, first ask yourself what you can bring to the table. And then you ask what you can get from the table. Dr. George C. Fraser wrote a great book called Success Runs in Our Race, and it's the best networking book out here. And one of the biggest things he taught me about networking that I really liked was he said a lot of people network by thinking about what the other person can do for them. And he said it's better to network by offering to support someone else, saying, what can I do for you? And then you create the law of reciprocity where people are willing to do more for you because you showed up and did things for them. I can say this, I go lots of places every single day. Somebody's asking me for something. 4 people asked me for something this morning before I even came in here today. Happens all the time. But when somebody shows up and is like, I see you have this issue. I'd like to help you with that. And I'm like, wait, you mean you want to help me? Oh gosh, this is something I gotta go talk to my therapist about this because I'm used to everyone asking me for something. Okay, so that creates a whole different dynamic. So I think with family, I think that rule is really important because if everybody's showing up saying, how can I be an asset to the other people in this family? That's crucial, and especially when you're talking about. I'm not going to talk specifically about men too much on this topic because I think it applies to women as well. But when I was talking to our son, and again, I'm his bonus dad. Like if you saw him, you would know that ain't that ain't Boyce's biological son because he's 6'8", and I told you, me and his dad though we both work together to stay on him. And I told him, I said, if I was to define one important trait of manhood that I think you should hold on to, is to ask yourself this question: when you die and people are at your funeral, are most of the people at your funeral going to say, my life is better because this man was in it? Or are they going to say, my life was worse? Right? Are you going to be the person where people say, yeah, because of him, I got this, because of him, I was able to do that? Or are you going to be the guy who just created a whole bunch of problems for a whole lot of people, left a trail of trauma for the last 30, 40 years, your kids on GoFundMe begging for money to bury you, which is absolutely humiliating, pathetic, right? Are you going to be that guy? Or are you going to be the guy where people say, gosh, he really, this, I'm telling you that I think that masculinity is divine. I think it's very powerful. I think that a man who's really determined, you got that bull in you where you can go through like a bull in a china shop. So a man's energy can either do something great or do something terrible. It really can. I can think of times where there were men who were extraordinary and solid and came through for people and people loved him and they felt protected and they wanted to be around him because he did everything in a way that was competent and decent and high level. And then I've seen men who were just complete assholes. I knew this guy who was not like 92 years old, and I felt sorry for him because he was 92 and he lived by himself. And it was real weird. He had a 27-year-old girlfriend. They would get together and smoke crack, and she would come around every time he got his government check. And so I'm like, why is this 92-year-old man? But then again, I mean, you're 92, you might as well do whatever you want, right? So whatever, right? I mean, he's 92. So anyway, it's not like he's gonna be around another 40 years. And so anyway, I remember I was asking his granddaughter. I said, that's kind of sad. This man's by himself. Like, why aren't he's got these kids and grandkids everywhere? They live in other states. Why aren't they checking on him? And she said, well, let me tell you what kind of man he was 40 years ago. He was an absolute terror. He was actually a hitman for these gangsters. And so he was very abusive and he tried to hit his wife in the head with a hammer. And just did all these horrible things to people. So now don't nobody want to be around him. And that to me made me reflect on the power of masculinity and how it's good or bad, right? So, and I think the same thing is true for women, because we know women have a type of power that's different from ours, but we know what a treacherous, terrible woman can do, and we know what a loving, wonderful, supportive woman can do, right? So ultimately, being an asset to the family, I think, means taking whatever's inside of you and just showing up to people and knowing which group of people, your clique, your group, the people around you, how can I be of help to you? Starting the conversation off with that, I think that goes a long way. Also, teaching that to children and grandchildren, getting them on that code is very, very important, because most wealth in America is actually family wealth. All right. The second commandment is this. For black people, this is more aggregate. This is big. We have to buy black whenever possible. This is conscious spending. Let me explain this. We've heard this statistic. How many have heard the statistic that black people have 1.6 trillion in so-called spending power? Okay, that's BS, because there's no such thing as spending power. That's not power. You're giving your money away. You're not making yourself more powerful. You're making yourself less powerful. Okay, so it's not spending power. We just have 1.6 billion or a trillion in spending opportunity or financial possibility, but that's not actual power. And so here's what's interesting, right? If you believe that statistic of 1.6 trillion, imagine if we were able to redirect 10% of that money into black-owned businesses. The big problem you have right now is that white people typically boycott black-owned businesses, and then black people boycott black-owned businesses. Why? Well, because culturally we have been typecast, and we typecast ourselves not as the owners of of a business. We typecast ourselves as employees of the business. That's why when a black business owner shows up and says, "Hey, I've got the same product as the white guy down the street," other black people look at him and say, "Who does Negro think he is? Like, oh, you think you better than the rest of us?" Right? Or you must be scamming me, because really, on a subconscious level, what you're really saying is, wait, you presented this product to me, this tech product, this cell phone, whatever it is you're selling, right? I don't identify you as a black man as being capable of doing that kind of thing. Because if you come up and told me you were a rapper, a comedian, or a basketball player, I would believe that, because that's the stereotype of where we are known to be most competent and capable. But when you say I'm running a business and it's going to be, my business is just as efficient as somebody else's business, well, I just don't believe you. It's like to give you an extreme example. Think about it. It's like when a Chinese guy shows up and says, "I can play basketball as well as Michael Jordan." We don't believe that. We're like, "No, you're Chinese. You should be doing karate or math." Right? That's how people think. That's just the truth. Right? And so every group has its stereotypes that you have to overcome. You have to deal with. And what is interesting about being black and being a descendant of slavery is that most of our stereotypes are just not positive stereotypes. They're not beneficial, not helpful. So effectively, buying black, just redirecting our money to black-owned businesses, even just 10% of that, 10% of 1.6 trillion is $160 billion. With $160 billion, you can create entire school systems. You could fund thousands of businesses. You create thousands of millionaires every single year. There's nothing you really cannot do. So effectively, that redirect, that consciousness coming into how you spend your money is very important. Your money is your power. Your money is your power. And so every time I let go of a dollar, I'm giving my power away. So if I let go of my dollars and I'm giving them to a business that's not in my community, that money's going to disappear. Especially when other people have established a one-sided relationship with the black community. Their relationship is, we take from you, we give you nothing back. We set up businesses in your neighborhoods and take all of your money, but you can't come to our neighborhood because we are conscious about our spending. We're not going to support you. You don't believe me? I want you to do an experiment. I want you to, as a black person, take your black ass to Chinatown, and I want you to set up the best Chinese restaurant you can possibly create, or even soul food. You can sell soul food. Maybe we're known for that. And I want you to see what happens. I want you to see how successful that business is. I want you to offer the best prices, the best quality food, and I want you to see how many people just walk right past you. Why? Because of culture. Many people in other groups have been culturally trained to keep their money to themselves. And why does that make sense? Well, it makes sense because when you keep money to yourself, your money multiplies. So to contrast, if I take my dollar and I go spend it at some businesses out of my community, that dollar disappears. It's gone. That $1, I got $1 use out of $1. But imagine if I spend $1 in this room, and let's say all of us are trained to buy black. So I spend my dollar with James, and James spends his money with Belinda. Belinda spends his money with the lady whose tag I can't read. But what's your name? Monique. 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 My daughter's name is Monique. Oh my God. Yeah. So anyway, now I'm excited. Okay. So what's happened here is that $1 has become $2, $3, and then she spends with him. That's $4. That's $5. So literally, by simply keeping money in our community, we're increasing black wealth because dollars are supposed to multiply. Dollars have what is called a ripple effect, like almost like a good version of what a virus does, right? If you have a virus, imagine if it's a good virus, like the happiness virus or something that makes you feel good. If I pass it to you, then it's going to spread out, right? So dollars kind of do the same thing. But if you spend money outside of your community, that money disappears. And it's very important for you to understand that. And in fact, what's really interesting, and this is something that we put together in the Black Business School to help us kind of see black wealth in a certain way. All we think about in the Black Business School is black wealth, not because we hate anybody else, but because we feel that the racial wealth gap is a serious problem that requires focus. Too many of us, because we're trying to fit into mainstream society, we dilute our energy. When I created the Black Business School, there were people who said, why would you call it the Black Business School? You're selling yourself short. You should be talking to everybody. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And I don't mind talking to everybody. I did that when I was on the faculty at Syracuse University. But I said, I think black people need special attention. I think that we need focus because we have unique challenges. We have unique experiences. We have a unique history. We also have unique opportunities. And so one of the models that we put together in the Black Business School is very, very basic, that allows you to understand economics, is what I call the 3C model of building your own economy. One of the reasons that systematic racism is so detrimental to the black community is because we are so committed to the system. White supremacy is a two-way dance. White supremacy really wouldn't work if we didn't believe in it so much. It wouldn't work. Think about it. It's like a football game. If I play for the Seattle Seahawks and I'm playing the Dallas Cowboys, do the Seahawks believe that they're superior to the Cowboys? Yes. Do the Cowboys believe they're superior to the Seahawks? Yes. Do the Seahawks care that the Cowboys believe that they're superior to them? No, they don't. They just get on the field and they play it out. They say, "Oh, you can think you're better than us all you want to, but we're gonna get out here and we're gonna fight and we're gonna battle for a win." So whether you think you're superior to me is kind of irrelevant. It only kind of works if I also think you're superior to me. And then at that point, I'm like, oh, you're a supremacist. You're a supremacist. Well, yeah, I mean, okay. Think whatever you want. But at the end of the day, I have to show up and be ready to compete. So to some extent, I would argue that a lot of white supremacy works because from birth, we are trained to submit to these systems. First thing you do when you have a black baby is you send your child to a white lady to educate her 9 times out of 10. No disrespect. Again, if you're white, don't get offended. I'm not gonna hurt you. And so you're going to school and your kids are learning how George Washington's the greatest man ever, and then they get to Black history. They teach you about Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman and a couple other people, and that's it, right? So you're not learning who you are, but you're learning everything about who somebody else is. And then they're also training you to be an employee, right? Rockefeller funded the public school systems extensively because they needed millions of people to be trained to be workers. That's what they needed. They're like, okay, we don't want people that are thinking creatively and independently and trying to lead. We need people that are going to get in line, learn how to sit down, shut up, and do what we tell them to do. Right? So you're being trained to participate in the system in a few different ways that is helpful to the elite, but it's not helpful to you. A few ways you're trained number one to be a consumer. Americans are the biggest consumers out here. Not just Black Americans. We just because we're exceptional at everything, we tend to be really, really heavy consumers. But generally speaking, Americans are big consumers. That's what drives a lot of the economy. That's what keeps rich people rich. And then the second way you're indoctrinated is you're trained to be employees. Anybody else grow up in a family where you never talked about owning businesses? You pretty much talked about getting jobs. Like you say to your parents, like, I need some money, and they say, well, you better get you a job. You don't work, you don't eat, right? I grew up in that environment too. And then also other things like even paying rent. I was never educated on the fact that when you're paying rent over a long period of time, you're making your landlord rich, Your landlord is taking all that money. They're able, you literally over a 20, 30-year period, you bought 2 or 3 houses for your landlord. That's wealth that gets passed down to his children, not yours, right? And then on top of that, you're working your entire life at this job that where you're going to die at your desk at the age of 65 and or 70 or whatever, and they're just going to replace you next week, right? In fact, I heard a guy say that he said a job is the biggest scam in America. And I said, it is. And he said, yeah. He said, because the job is the only place where you can work your butt off for 40 years and then end with less money than you had when you started. I mean, there are people, college educated people in our community who are going to die with a net worth that's less than a newborn baby. There are newborn babies who've never worked a day in their life that have a net worth that is higher than a lot of people. A lot of us who went to college got the student loans and everything else. Right? So something has to fix. Something has to be fixed. But again, this is where consciousness comes into play. If you're unconscious and you just go along with whatever they tell you to do, then next thing you know, you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, I'm 45 years old. I worked my butt off. I went to college. I did all the right things. And I'm not where I really want to be. That's because the system leans on us unconsciously sort of following the predefined process. So let me give you a quick model on how you can create your own economy. The best way to overcome a system is to leave the system. Right? A lot of us talk about fighting racism from within, and I'm going to go get this job, and where I'm the only manager out of 300 people, I'm the only black one, and I'm going to go in here and fight the power and everything else. And God bless you if you're doing that. I think there's a role for that. That's fine. Do that. But that's not the only route you can take. Our ancestors didn't take that route. They didn't have that option. They didn't have affirmative action, which we know that that's gone. So now we have to figure out how to live in a world without affirmative action. They didn't have integration even. So, and what did they do? Well, there's a reason why black people own more businesses 100 years ago than we own today. We own 15 times more land 100 years ago than we own today. Because fitting into the system and fighting through the system wasn't even an option. And I'm going to argue that in many cases, I think it ends up being a waste of time. It's very, very stressful. Black men die earlier than everyone else. And the number one factor that contributes to the stress and the hypertension and everything else is the stress of getting up and going to work every day with somebody who hates your guts. Being disrespected on a regular basis, mistreated, mad, just mad every day. So I'm going to say that the best way to overcome a system is just walk out of the system. Why do I say it that way? Well, because it's this thing that we forget about, something we let go of called common sense. Common sense says this. This is, and I didn't even get my common sense till I was about 40. So think about this, right? I was like, wait a minute. I'm a 40-year-old man with a PhD, and I'm just figuring this out because of my culture was different, was what it was. I said, okay, so no wonder we don't understand this. So here's the common sense, right? And this has to overcome a lot of your programming. I grew up believing that the world was supposed to be fair, right? I grew up believing falsely that I could go to a company established by somebody who wasn't black and work around a bunch of people who don't look like me, and they're going to treat me the same as they treat each other. And then if it doesn't happen, I can raise hell, and eventually they're going to correct their actions, and everything's going to be okay. Does that typically happen in the real world? No, it doesn't. You just end up being the angry black person, then you get fired one day because you're a troublemaker now, right? That's what I've seen. That's been my experience, okay? And I said, okay, but wait a minute, I need to think about this. And this is when a few years earlier, I met Dr. Claude Anderson. I started reading things and thinking about stuff, and I said, okay, wait a minute, let me think about this from just a human level. I said, okay, I cannot imagine a scenario where another man can move inside my house and then tell me where to put the furniture. Right? Like let's say, what's your name, sir? Adonis. Okay, so Adonis, you seem like a nice guy, right? So let's say we're buddies and you say, hey man, I'm having a tough time and I need a place to stay. And I say, okay, well, don't worry, man. You come stay with us, man. You my buddy. Come on in, man. So you come into my house. Am I gonna let you sleep in the master bedroom? No! Stop asking. No, it ain't happening. I'm playing. But really, no. I'm gonna be like, no. You stay in the basement, right? Or when it's time to eat, I'm not gonna feed you before I feed my kids. I gotta feed my wife, me, and my kids. If there's food left, then we can give you some food, right? And then when you're in the house, if I decide, because this is my house, I'm not being mean. I hope you don't think I'm being mean to you, nothing like that. I'm making a point here, okay? Um, if we decide what we're going to do that day inside the house, and you say, well, no, Boyce, I don't think we should do that. I think we should do something else. We should, whatever, play house music. I'll be like, who the hell are you? This ain't your house, right? Like, so here's my point. I don't think you can move into another person's house or institution and think you're really going to be able to shape the policies of that home or of that institution. You won't. You're a guest. So if I can't move into another man's house and then make the rules of that house, what makes us think we can move into these companies that have been owned and controlled by other people and then reshape the direction and the policies of those institutions? No, they're going to fight for their territory. They're going to say, no, 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 we built this. This is ours. Go get your own. Start your own. You don't like the rules here, get your own bit. And that's what because me and my son had that conversation when he came home from college and wanted to live in the house. I was like, okay, you can stay here, but here's how things are gonna go. Oh, you don't like that? Oh, well, there's a bus stop down the street, and you can go pay $3,000 a month for an apartment. Whatever you want to do whatever you want to do. You have freedom. You have freedom to do whatever you want. But unfortunately, I'm giving you freedom, but you ain't got no resources. Kind of like what they did to black people, like during Juneteenth. They said, you're free, but you ain't got nothing. So if you ain't got no resources, but you supposedly have freedom, are you really free? No, you're not free. You're not free. And we know the myth of Juneteenth. The myth of Juneteenth, they showed up on big white horses and said, oh, you're free to go. And they were like, hallelujah, this is great. Well, number one, they told most of the slaves they had to go back to work for the same master that they had before. So they went from being unpaid slaves to being paid slaves. Then they made vagrancy laws that said if you don't have a job working for somebody, we're going to incarcerate you and lease you back to your slave master. And then you have that third category of black people that said, to hell with y'all, we're going to go be free. We're going to go and do the hard work to establish black-owned towns, which there were hundreds of them all around the country. It wasn't just Black Wall Street. And we're going to develop our own institutions. We're going to do the work to develop something that's uniquely ours. So ultimately, I'm going to say this. I think to this day, most black people are still not free. I don't, freedom means getting up every day, doing what you want to do. Most of us are not free because I don't think you can be free in this country without having the resources for freedom. Also, when you are in institutions that were created in the image of other people who have a different culture from yours, I think that it is an incredibly difficult, almost impossible uphill battle to reshape those institutions. So the solution to overcoming a racist or unfair system is to leave the system. The solution is to build your own. That's what we must do. So, one of the models we created in the Black Business School is what we call the 3 C's of building an economy. The 3 C's stand for it stands for capital, contractors, and customers. Capital, contractors, and customers. Let me give you an example. Capital is just the market. It's where you get the money that you need in order to create the business or the institution. Raise the money, right? So if I have the idea of starting a school and I reach out to you all and I say, okay, to get the school off the ground, I'm gonna need $20,000. Here's the proposal, and you raise your hand, and I got 2,000, I got 5,000, I got 12,000. Well, we raise the money to get the school started, right? That's the capital component. Now you got the capital base you need to build an institution. Then we need the contractors. Who's going to do the work? Who's going to do the labor? For a long time, black people did most of the labor in this country, and that's why America's as wealthy as it is right now, right? So then I go to that's what you might call a labor market. The labor market is where I say, okay, I got this school that we're going to create. We've raised the money. Now we need somebody who has experience teaching these kids. How many of you have some experience teaching, and you think you could teach children? Raise your hand. Okay, so right here in this room, I could get all the teachers I need to run the school, most likely, right? And then you got the third market. You need customers. That's where you've done the work, you've made the investment, you've done the work, created the product. Now you have to sell the product, right? And once you get customers, you win. Now you got a functioning business. How many of you have badass kids or grandkids that you would like to drop off to the Dr. Boyce Watkins Seattle School for Black Economic Intelligence? Anybody know some kids? Yeah, everybody here childless? How many of y'all got kids? Would you say any of your kids? Anybody, grandkids, nieces, nephews? Okay, all right. So we got our first crop of kids, right? And let's say the tuition is, I don't know, let's say it's $150 a month or something like that, $200, whatever it takes to run the school. Well, now you got a functioning business. You raise the money, you're doing the work, and you're selling the product, and you've created an economy. And here's the thing: you can do this in your own family. You can do this with your investment club. I was telling the sister backstage. I said, well, and she said that I said, are y'all related? And she said, well, this is my soul sister, right? And I said, yeah, well, sometimes if your relatives aren't what you need them to be, you just got to go create some, right? And so finding those relatives, finding those people that are on the same page, and a lot of these people are in this room. I can see, I'm looking in your faces, and I see your energy, and it's positive and intelligent energy, right? You can go conquer the world when you have people like that. You really don't need a whole lot of people in order to do this. What I do in my family is every Sunday I get on a Zoom with my family, and all we do is we talk, and we talk about first of all, we connect with love. Love is a powerful glue, economically and otherwise. So if I let you know I love you, and I show up as an asset to you, and I say how can I help you, or what are you going through, then we're going to connect in a way where there's trust. Trust is very important in economics. When there's no trust, you can't build an economy. If you want to know how recessions work, recessions are generally driven by a lack of trust. And let me give you an example. Anybody remember when all the banks were failing?
Yeah.
How did you feel? Did you trust, like if you had like a small bank, did you trust putting all your money in that bank? No. No, what you probably did what my mama did. My mama called me and she said, should I take my money out? I have the credit union, what should I do? Right? You're scared, right? And think about this. The more people that are scared to put their money in banks, does that make banks more successful? No, it increases the likelihood they're going to fail. So one of the things that they were doing was they were saying, how do we get the trust back into the system? Where they were going on TV and saying, no, the system is fine, it is stable, we're good, America's fine, right? They were doing all these things because they needed to get you to be confident and to trust that everything was okay. Right? And so a lot of the fundamentals of trust comes from love. If I let you know I love you, then we trust each other. Once we trust each other, then we can connect with each other. We can do business together. We can transact in many ways. Right? Even love is a transaction that's very similar to economics. You're not going, ladies, men, you're not going to sleep and lay down with somebody if you don't trust them. Fellas, if you think that woman's going to put you to sleep and rob you like Cardi B, I don't know if y'all saw that Cardi B, the rapper, was talking about how she used to seduce men, and then she would put a date rape drug in their drink and then rob them while they were knocked out, right? You're not going to lay down with a lady like that. Same thing with women. If you think that a man's going to harm you or violate you, you don't trust him, you're not going to feel comfortable interacting with him on a certain level. So the same thing is true with economics. So you build that trust, and then at that point, we can do so many great things together, because when you have trust, you're able to create various transactional scenarios with each other where I'm not worried about whether or not you're going to pay me back. If I loan you money, I know you got me. If I do a favor for you, I know eventually I'm gonna be able to call them the favor. It's gonna be okay. I don't do that for people I don't trust. So never underemphasize. Again, we're talking about culture, and the reason we're talking about this aspect of trust in culture is because I bet you, if I ask you to raise your hand, how many of you have a couple of relatives, or one or two relatives that you just don't trust? Seriously, how many of y'all have relatives that you would never loan money to, because if you loan them money, they would never pay you back? Right? All of us, we all go through this. So when I was writing this book, part of my thinking was like, okay, we have to address that culture and redevelop that love and trust and know what that looks like, which starts with being on code. And for example, telling the children, like things like my father told me, my father said, stealing from a relative is the worst thing you can do. That makes you lower than any scumbag on the planet. That's what he said. Is that true? I don't know, but that's what my father said, so I believed it. Well, guess what? When you borrow money from a relative and you don't pay them back, you're stealing from them, basically. They trusted you. They gave you half of their paycheck because you said you're going to give it back on Tuesday so they can go pay their bills. And then Tuesday comes around, you call this Negro up, they ain't answering the phone. Or you ask for your money, they get an attitude, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. Believe it or not, there's a whole theory of finance about this. They call this moral hazard. Moral hazard is where when you give somebody what they want, then suddenly their whole attitude flips on you. Like, ladies, maybe you sleep with a guy and then suddenly he's not nice like he was before. He was trying to get whatever good stuff he thought you could give him. Right? All this is true. So really understanding codes of behavior is very important to overcoming these problems, because if you don't overcome these problems, then you have the problem that the Black community has economically, which is we have a hard time doing business with each other and building wealth because the trust is not there.
That's right.
Which translates into people saying, well, this is why I don't go to Black-owned businesses. Oh, that Negro, he's a scammer. Or I don't loan money to nobody. Nobody in my family. I don't loan money to nobody. You never loan money to family. Anybody hear people say stuff like that? Because it makes sense. Because your family might be terrible. But that's not how wealthy families operate. That's just not. They're like, yeah, I would remember when I was trying to become an entrepreneur and I would listen to these podcasts where entrepreneurs would tell their stories and I'm gonna tell you, white people can be so interesting. I remember I would hear them tell these fascinating stories. Like this lady would be like, "Oh yeah, I started my business and I needed to raise $500,000, so I went to my uncle and my aunt and they gave me the money." And I'm like, "What relatives do you got?" I can't get $500 from my relatives, you know. And so just thinking about these sorts of things made me process, a lot of the things we're talking about today, and which goes to the third commandment. Let's move to the third one. Um, I believe in order for us to really reach our economic potential, culturally speaking, black wealth should be a rite of passage for every child in our community, every child in our family. A rite of passage. What does that mean? That means that every black child should know how to start a business by the age of 12, not because they all need to be entrepreneurs, but because they can't just depend on the system to provide what they need. Because at some point they may run into a roadblock where you're black, you're the last hired, first fired, you can't get the same opportunities. Maybe you're pissed off, you decide to tell your boss about himself that day. Next thing you know, not only are you fired from your job, maybe you're blackballed from your industry. And being an entrepreneur helps you overcome all of that. That helps you at least say, okay, I know how to get a product and sell a product to somebody who needs it, and that will give me the money I need in order to survive. Why is that important? Well, because if I come home as a man and I'm telling my wife that we can't feed the kids because the white man ain't hiring, my wife is not gonna respect me. She's not supposed to. I'm sorry. I know we believe unconditional love. All the science says that women tend to be most comfortable in situations that provide financial security. Various forms of security, not just financial. That's just a reality. I'm not saying it means that you have to be rich to be a worthy man, because on the internet they have all these crazy conversations about high value man and high value woman. No. What I'm saying is that there's something to be said about coming through for the people that you love. And I will say, and this is my bias, I told my father, my father's not well either. He's ill like my mother. So it's the hardest year ever for our family. It's just real tough. And we were talking about his funeral, and he was telling me, and I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm fiercely loyal to my father because he took care of me when nobody else did. I was 3 years old. My biological father, never got to know him. And he said, I want you to speak at my funeral. I said, okay. And he said, I want somebody who's not going to bullshit. I need somebody that really knows me, that's going to really tell the truth. And my father's a complex man. He fought in the Vietnam War. I think Agent Orange is part of what causes his health problems to this day. He overcame a heroin addiction when he came back from Vietnam because you know what they did to those poor guys. It was terrible. And anyway, I said, if I speak at your funeral, I cannot tell them that you were a good man because I'd be lying. Because you weren't always a good man. I said, but you were always a great man. And the thing is that sometimes being a great man doesn't afford you the luxury to always be a good man. My father has had to kill people to defend other people. He was a police officer. And I said, and you being a great man taught me a lot, because when the situation called for you to rise to a certain level, you just did what you had to do. And you sacrificed yourself, maybe your own emotional, mental health, in order to do that, because you felt this requirement to come through for us. And I know that maybe there might have been better ways to do it. I'm sure that a therapist would say, again, my wife is a therapist, so she'll say, well, there's a lot of emotional damage that comes to that. And I'm like, yeah, I get all that. But at the same time, that shield of protection was really important, because he figured out how to solve the problem. He got it done. And so what I really think is this. So let's backtrack to what I said earlier about why every black child should know how to start a business at the age of 12. Well, if you understand how to start a business and how to generate opportunities for yourself, you're better able to come through for people when they need you to. Your 4-year-old daughter does not want to hear that she can't eat because you can't get a job or because life is hard for you. And I get it. It is. It sucks. It's terrible. But you have to be able to come through. In a way, to use another analogy, it's like if you play basketball. I don't know if anybody's ever played basketball. Let me use a basketball analogy. If a player has just one move, that's an easy player to stop. It's easy to defend you. If I know every time you're going to go left and you're going to go to the basket, well, I know exactly how to guard you. But the players that are the most difficult to stop are the ones who have multiple moves. And when I talk about playing defense, I'm talking about things like white supremacy, where they're stopping us from getting what we deserve, stopping us from getting opportunities, blocking us when we're trying to build and create. Well, if you got one move, it's easy to stop you. If your only move for wealth building is to fill out a job application, then I can easily stop you. I just blackball you or whatever it is I want to do, right? But the toughest players to defend, would be like the Kobe Bryants, who had 1,000 moves. He couldn't just go right. He could go left. He could go right. He could go behind his back. He could spin. He could shoot layups, free throws, three-pointers. He could shoot from any place on the court. He was very difficult to defend. So what I'm saying is that the same model should be applied economically. Our children should have multiple moves when it comes to building wealth. And being an entrepreneur gives you that ability. Entrepreneurs are like they're like those people that can go into the woods. Like if you put me in the woods right now and said, survive in the woods. Well, I'd probably die in about 2 weeks. The woods could be full of all kinds of animals and berries and all kinds of stuff, but I would die. I would starve to death because I wouldn't know what to do. But imagine if you put somebody in the woods who's been trained on how to hunt, how to fish, what types of plants you can eat and which ones are poisonous, and all these other survival mechanisms, how to build shelter, all that. Well, that person could survive and probably create a better life in the woods than they even had when they were back with civilization. So economically speaking, your kids have to learn how to survive in the woods. They can't go through life looking for opportunities. They should also go through life knowing how to create opportunities. Because I propose this is going to sound radical to some people, but I propose that part of that training to look for opportunities is part of our commitment to white supremacy. And let me explain this. I remember hearing something that sounded pretty strong and radical to me back when I was a kid, but I thought about it and it made me assess it differently. I remember hearing James Brown say, I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open the door and I'll get it myself. Anybody heard that? And that's a powerful statement. It's excellent. It's great. Nothing wrong with that. But then you get older, you start asking other questions like, well, who controls the door? Who owns the damn door? How do you build doors? I want to be the person. I don't want to be the person who gets let into the door. I want to be the person who owns the door, who decided that there's a door there in the first place. Right? So rather than being the person who's always looking for the opportunities, understand that opportunities are not these magical things that just come out of the sky. Somebody creates those opportunities. So when I'm in church and I'm saying, please, Jesus, give me my job and my promotion that I want to get on Monday, I might as well honestly be praying to white people because it's some white man typically somewhere who decides if that job is going to be available to me, if that opportunity is going to open up for me, if that raise and that promotion is going to even exist, right? So to some extent, when you think that way, you're putting other people in the position of being your economic God. They have the ability to manifest whatever your reality is going to be. And so when you give that power to other people, then don't be surprised when they control you. That which they give you, they can also take away. And the thing is that America is a country that is, I'm not one of these people that walks around thinking America is always terrible. I just don't feel that way. I've been in too many countries. I've seen too much poverty to believe that everything here is bad. But I have seen the dirty stuff too. And I can tell you that America is absolutely masterful at economic warfare and using their vast economic power to control agendas, manage people, shift culture, propaganda, the whole nine. There's so many countries, Africa sees it all the time, so many countries where the United States says, oh, well, you don't want to change your laws? Well, we're not going to send you money anymore. Right? So ultimately, if they're doing this all around the world, you don't think they're doing it to you? Yeah, everybody, they're doing it to you. Yeah, economic warfare is very, very real. So to prepare your children for economic warfare, one of the most important things you must do is give them that basic skill of entrepreneurship. Think about it. It probably takes a kid less than 2 weeks to learn some of the basics of, okay, here's how you create a product, here's how you sell it, here's how you find a customer for the product, give people what they need, and then they'll pay you for it. That's how I talk to my kids. I don't put them through formal classes and all stuff. No, we just have conversations about life. Oh, you want to be free? Well, you should probably get some money. Here's how you get money. When we talk about careers, we don't talk about doctor, lawyer, and all that. I'm like, no, I just want you to be happy. And the best way to be happy typically is to have enough economic freedom so that your happiness is not impeded by your need to go to some job every day in order for you to pay your basic bills. So if I help you pay your basic bills, then I can give you that freedom to pursue happiness wherever it lives for you. At that point, you got to do your own internal journey to figure out what it means to be happy, because a lot of people on Instagram are going to make you think that being happy means having a certain house, a certain car, or a boyfriend or girlfriend that looks a certain way. All that's a bunch of crap. Okay, so that's literally the conversation we have. That's why our 12-year-old is the weirdest kid in her class, because she's got 2 college professors that talk to her like this every day at home, right? So what I would say is the second thing to do in terms of rite of passage is every child in our community. This is going to put us ahead now. This is not equality. I don't do equality talk. This is liberation talk. This is winning. Every child should have somebody investing for that child from the time they're born, putting money in the stock market on behalf of that child from the time that they're born. Why is that? Well, because if you break down economics and you look at money in a very detailed way, I'm a math guy, and we see the math. And the number one variable in wealth building is this thing called time. And your children and your grandchildren are the wealthiest people in your family because they have more time than everybody else. And even wealthier than those children are the unborn children. And so if you have the vision to even see the children that are not yet born, like to look at your 12-year-old and realize your 12-year-old is going to have children one day, and you start preparing and investing for those children and using and investing that time, then guess what happens? That child, by the time they're 25 years old and they start to become economically conscious and they start to realize that they need money to be happy and survive in the world, they're going to be so wealthy that they're playing in a different level by that point. Really, again, for example, actually do this. If you have a phone, text the word stock to 31996. 31996. Text the word stock to 31996, and I'm going to send you something. Text the word stock, STOCK, to 31996. And what I'm going to send you is something that very basic that we put together in the Black Business School called the $5 a day investing plan. The $5 a day investing plan, I had to come up with this because there were so many people, I call them Negro naysayers, who absolutely fought against our messages when we first started. Now, they're fewer and far between now because I think that we were able to shift some of the culture. But in the very beginning, when I was doing this stuff, 2007, 2008, 2009, I had so many people telling me that it's a waste of time to talk to Black people about investing because Black people don't have any wealth. And it drove me crazy because I'm like, 1.6 trillion in spending every year, that's more than the gross domestic product of 95% of the countries on this planet. Most countries don't have the amount of money that the Black community has. So stop telling me Black people are poor. That's insanity to me. So what I did was, instead of arguing, I just used math. So the $5 a day investing plan says if you have $5 a day, and $5 a day is not even enough to buy a Happy Meal, you can't buy a Popeye's chicken value meal. And if you have $5 a day and you invest that money consistently, even blindly, into S&P 500 stocks, literally, you don't even have to know, a 5-year-old can do this. Actually, monkeys, they did an experiment. Monkeys did this. They literally taught monkeys to invest by throwing darts at a wall. So no education required, no nothing. Just buy the stocks, hold them, don't sell them. You do that consistently, or it can be $35 a week or $140 a month, and weekly, monthly, daily. That's not the issue. Just $5 a day on average, and you're buying stocks in the S&P 500. You do that. After 10 years, you have approximately $29,000 in liquid assets. Most people, you cannot, even if you started off poor, you can't say that you have $29,000 liquid in the bank and that you're poor. You're not poor anymore. So less than a decade, you're out of poverty, no matter where you start. But then the good stuff happens after that. After 20 years, you've got about $102,000. This is based on the history of the stock market. After 30 years, you have about $250,000. 40 years is $750,000. And this is really the bare minimum. So when people will come back and they say, well, black people can't afford to invest, I would just say, well, it's $5. And if you can't buy Popeye's chicken, a value meal with that. I said, can black people afford chicken? You can't tell me black people can't afford chicken. Because I can put a Popeye's chicken in the poorest neighborhood in America, and within one day, there'll be a line out the door, down the block, and around the corner full of people that don't need to be eating Popeye's chicken. Okay, so that's why I set the number at that level. But here's the thing: when I'm talking to intelligent people like you, who already know, I kind of feel like I'm preaching to the choir. Right? I kind of feel like I'm talking to people that already understand. I don't have to convince you that this stuff matters. If I did, you wouldn't be in this room. So I'm not really saying you should do $5 a day for your kids or grandkids. If that's what you can afford, do it. But if you got it like that, you got a little extra money, why not do 10 a day or 20 a day even? 20 a day, even $20 a day, 4x that amount. $20 a day times 30 days, that's $600 a month. The average car note in America is about $750-ish. Some people have car notes that are over $1,000. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that from a culture value system, wealth is culture, I'm hoping culturally speaking that your children are at least worth a car note to you. Because if your children aren't worth the car note, then we can't have the conversation because we don't come from the same place. Right? That's it. I can talk all day. You're not going to hear it because you don't even care about your kids like that. Okay? But for those of you that care, or your grandkids, or nieces, nephews, whatever, right? You do $20 a day, then the numbers really get interesting. It's not $29,000 after 4 years. It becomes about 100 and almost 120,000. I mean, after 10 years. 20 years, instead of 102,000, it's about $408,000. After 30 years, it's not $250,000, it's almost $1 million. So your child is a millionaire or close to it by the time they're 30. And if you've done the other part of the rite of passage by training them how to run their own business, guess what? They never have to work for anybody. They can then spend their time pursuing their dream. They have the skill to implement that, and they've got the capital. So they can go pull 10 grand out of the money that grandma or their father or mother, whoever, invested for them, and start that business with their friends. And guess what? The conversations about how racist it is to be on the job and all this stuff, they're not having those conversations because they're working around people that they want to be around. Yes. Do you understand? Do you see that? Is this getting through? Okay. All right. So, and then the last piece of the rite of passage, very basic. Things like renting versus owning. I think that's really important too. Right? This is easy. It's better to be the landlord than it is to be the renter. The renter is donating to the wealth of the landlord every single month. Having them understand that owning property as soon as possible is an incredible key to wealth. When my wife bought her first house, see, a lot of people, the internet is full of like chatty patty, gossipy, weird people that just say stuff that with no factual basis whatsoever. And so there were people when I married my wife, there were people who said, "Oh, she married him just because he got money," and whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, so oh, is she okay? Oh, is he okay? Okay. Oh no. Is he okay? Okay. Is the brother good? Okay, good. All right, good. I'm glad to see that. Okay, so the thing was that so when people were saying that, like, oh, she just married him because he's got money, I was like, oh, so basically what you're telling me is that you hang out with these gold digging, low quality people, because that's never been of interest to me. But my wife had wealth not because she is interested in financial stuff. My wife tells me all the time that when I talk about financial stuff, she falls asleep, and she's never taken a finance class in her life. But she had parents that told her some basic things like buy a house as soon as you can, and she did. Max out your 401k. Again, cultural. When they give you a 401k and they match the funds, you max it out. She maxed out her 401k. So by the time we got together, she was already good. She already had money. And here's the other interesting thing. The money that she put down to buy her first house came from some World War II savings bonds her grandfather bought for her bought for the family in 1942. Wow. Literally. So there was somebody in her family that had enough vision to say, I'm going to have kids and grandkids and great grandkids. They're going to need money. Let me go ahead and set them up now. So the same way that she had the great grandfather who thought about her way back in 1942, I want you to think about those great great grandkids that are going to be around in the year 2100 that can benefit from the things that you can do for them right now. Woo. Next. The next commandment, number 4, is create fertile economic soil. Fertile economic soil comes from this concept, comes from the fact that if you look at wealth and how wealth grows, and we, as a scholar in this area, we see everything with math. A lot of the equations we use, like I could put something on the board that says, okay, if you invest this amount and the interest rate is that much and the risk is at this level, this is how much money you'll have at a certain time. That's how we did the $5 a day plan. Most of those equations in finance, we steal our ideas. Most of those equations actually come out of biology. The roots of those equations actually come from the biologists, and biology is a science that's been around much longer than finance. In biology, they had equations that would say if you have a tree where you plant a seed and the tree grows at a certain rate, this is how big the tree will be after a certain amount of time. You can do that with any living thing. You can do that with a human being. If I have a newborn baby and the baby has these characteristics, then after the age of 12, the child will be at this level. You can put that as a mathematical function. And so one of the things that is true about wealth is not just what I mentioned to you earlier, that literally time is the dominant variable and all that. You give me enough time, it's very, very hard to make somebody a millionaire like in a week. And that's why culture is so important, and the bastardization of culture is so detrimental. It's because they got all these weekend millionaires that they can market. If somebody got a record deal on an NBA contract, or you see somebody on Instagram that's showing off all these cars, making you think that you got to have $1 million by the time you're 29, when you don't realize that maybe they're actually dealing drugs or whatever. That's what the culture is showing. But actually, getting rich quickly is really hard to do. But getting rich slowly is very easy to do. If you give me enough time, anybody in this room, I could literally make anyone and put anyone in millionaire status, and definitely do that for your kids. It's really easy. You have to do those consistent things, like I explained earlier. But one of the things that must also happen when you talk about building wealth is you have to have a certain, what I call economic soil that facilitates the building of wealth. And let's talk specifically about building businesses. All right. So, has anybody ever run into a situation where maybe you or someone you know decided they want to start a business, and they tell their relatives what they're going to do, and they get nothing but negative feedback? Why'd you quit that good job at the post office? Oh, don't worry. You can keep working on a little business. Somebody will hire you eventually. Right? That's sort of very negative. Oh, that's scary. Are you sure? I don't know if you should do that. I don't know if you should put all that money. Right? So what this is doing is this is shaping how you view risk. Because starting a business requires risk. Right? And the truth of business ownership is that 86% of all Black-owned businesses fail within a year and a half. And a lot of this is driven by what I call that toxic economic soil, where you start off doing this thing that's really hard and you're not even getting the encouragement that you need. And I'm just talking about the emotional support. I'm not even talking about the financial support that you need. So you're not getting the backing financially. You don't have people around you that maybe understand what's going on, where they can give you the kind of advice and guidance and networking that you need to be successful. And then you have people that are just in your ear telling you why you're going to fail. Well, of course the failure rate's going to be high. Because when you take risks, there's always the chance that something's going to go wrong. I had a friend who's an Indian woman who is a very nice lady, and she knows that I listen to everybody's ideas, and I don't care that she's a Republican. I think that she runs into people that get offended by that, and I'm like, I don't care what your political party is, And she says, Boyce, can I say something? Can I tell you something that I found in my research that I don't want to sound racist? And I was like, no, I know what your heart is. Like, just tell me. And she said, I was really shocked by how few African Americans want to start businesses. She said, I looked at all the different groups, and African Americans were way down there. And then she had a theory, and the theory actually made sense. She said that when you talk about risk is something where things can either go right or they can go wrong, right? And what you focus on is going to determine whether or not you're successful or whether or not you even take the risk in the first place. So a person who, let's say, who's been traumatized, thus our trauma level's very high. My wife, the therapist, had me take a trauma test. She said, "You're so traumatized, you're half crazy. I don't know why I married you." And so when the trauma's high, then every situation you're like, oh my God, like this can go bad. Like, oh, you gotta watch out, you know. And this can manifest itself in not just whether or not you're willing to take certain risks, but whether or not the people around you are gonna support you in taking that risk. Years ago, before I met my wife, there was this nice lady I met, and I happened to get invited to go on this trip to Eastern Europe to give this speech on a cruise ship. And I had an extra ticket, and I was trying to impress her and try to be fly. I'm not very good at that. And I invited her to go on this trip with me. Now, she was a black woman from Mississippi, and she was eager to go. You know, I was like, yeah, let's go. She's like, okay, you know. And she tells her aunts and her uncles what she's going to do. And literally everybody's like, oh my God, I'm so scared. You know, and I was like, are they scared that I'm going to hurt you or something? Because we've been dating a few months, but not that long. And she said, no. She said they were just scared. I said, what were they scared of? She said they were just scared of going to Europe, just of leaving the country, being on the ship, right? Everything was like fear, 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 fear. And then she came back and they were like, oh my God, I'm so glad you made it back. I was praying for you every day. And we were just kind of fascinated by how all this fear like was in the air. Now, not to say things can't go wrong. People have died on cruise ships. You know, there are bad men out here. You know, like, so I get all that. But it was just sort of this overwhelming amount of like just artificial fear that just fascinated me. And so think about this. When you talk about walking away from the thing that you know, the security of that job and doing what everybody else in your family is doing, and you say, I want to go over here and do something different, that maybe that has at best a 50-50 shot of succeeding, then you're going to get all that fear, right? Like if I come to you and I say, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. Well, if you are a scary Negro and you live in fear constantly, you're going to be like, that's crazy. Look at all the people that have died. You're going to send me articles every day about somebody who fell off the mountain or froze to death or whatever, right? And what's that going to do to me? Is that going to make me more excited to go, especially if I know you, love you, and trust you, and I've been listening, you're like a mentor to me, right? I'm going to start getting scared. Now, is that going to increase or decrease the likelihood that I succeed? It's going to decrease it, right? In fact, it'll decrease the likelihood that I even try, right? So here's what I believe. I believe that if I'm, and take it from somebody who's been doing crazy stuff my whole life. Most of the stuff I do now, I had so many relatives that loved me. Thank you very much, Kavir. That loved me, that were trying to help me, who were basically trying to talk me off of a ledge. God would send me a message. Okay, boys, I want you to go over here and do this and go hard and do your best. And I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go do it. But then I start telling my family, and it would just, that message would get diluted with all the like, oh, that's crazy. Bad things are going to happen. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose your job. Let me tell you about my cousin. He did the same thing, and now he's dead. Just whatever, right? That's what you would get. So here's the conclusion I came to, and I know it's almost time for lunch, is when you decide that you have some purpose and you have that vision, and again, God gives you that vision. He didn't give it to everybody else. You absolutely have to do a couple things. Number one, you can't share that vision with people that can't see a big vision. You just can't. It's going to dilute, it's going to undermine everything you're trying to do. Small-minded people can't see the big vision. You just got to go complete it and then show them what you did. Because people like that, unfortunately, they believe things once they see it. So certain things that I did in my life and my career, I just did it. And then I would show them the result and they would be like, oh, wow, look at that, right? But you can't tell them before the vision is actually real. Then the second thing is, I just have a rule. If I come to you and I tell you I'm going to climb Mount Everest, first of all, stop telling me that it's impossible to do, because that's just not true. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have already done this. Lots of people have failed, though. The only way you can help me at that point is not by telling me all the ways I can fail. You can only help me by telling me all the ways I can succeed. And you only mention potential failure as a precursor to saying, here's how you solve the problem. People freeze to death on Mount Everest, so make sure you wear a certain jacket, right? People tend to be in danger on this part of the ledge, so make sure you go the other direction, right? I don't need you to tell me all the reasons it's not going to work, and stop telling me that it's impossible. I know that it's hard. I know the likelihood of failure may be as high as 90%. but I'm going to do this, and I need to be in that top 10%. So the only way you can help me, the only way you can create the fertile soil that I need to possibly do this thing that may not succeed is I need you to help me solve the problem. And the other thing that I do not need is somebody sitting around waiting for something to go wrong so they can say, I told you so. That sucks. That just sucks. And it is so unfair. And the reason it's unfair is because when you go and you decide to start that business, when you say, you know what, I want to be like the kids who started UPS in 1919 by delivering packages on their bicycles. You know, when you have that vision, and remember with full acknowledgement that 99% of the businesses that start with kids delivering packages on their bicycles don't turn into UPS. But that doesn't mean you're not supposed to do it. All of us could go try to do the same thing. 80% of us could fail, but it's that 20% that succeed that has to be allowed to live. You can't let the 80% kill the other 20%. Do you understand? And so having a bunch of Negro naysayers sitting around waiting to say, I told you so, that doesn't mean anything. If I go try to do something and I'm probably not going to succeed, and then I don't succeed, and you sit there and you say, well, I told you not to do it. I told him not to do it. He did that stuff. That's not helping at all. And it doesn't mean that I was wrong. I could have been 100% correct. It just didn't work out. It's like getting married. You know, like I got married and I have people that are just scared and everything. All these women, they'll do this and they'll do that and they'll take all your money and all that. You get it, they'll just divorce you up. And I'm like, Lord. Because on one hand, you feel this pressure, like, man, we can't have no marital problems. Because we do it, they find out, they're gonna talk bad about us. They're going to say, I told you so. Or if we get a divorce, then no. I just told people, I said, look, you know, I love my wife. I plan to be with her until the day I die and for the next 10 million years, you know, in the afterlife. But if we don't work out, that does not make it a bad decision. That just means we tried. And that's more than I can say for your punk ass. Because you sitting there so scared, you ain't trying nothing. So that's what I'm saying to you. This is the message I'll give you before we go to lunch. Whatever your vision is, you know, think it through, make a plan, get with your team, and just try. Because even if you fail, you have succeeded. You have succeeded. Well, thank you all very much. I look forward to talking to you at lunch.